2018. Happy Halloween to everyone. We have on the dais, to my right is Jackie Paniotto, the clerk to the County Commission. I am Denise Driehaus, president of the Commission. To my left is the vice president of the Commission, Stephanie Summerow-Dumas. Next to her is Jeff Aluda, the county administrator, and legal counsel Michael Friedman is at the end. We will start the meeting with the silent prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance, so please stand if you can. Amen. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to move that we approve of the minutes of the previous session.
Second.
Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. We've got a couple speakers here on item number 9. And so with your deference, I'm going to move that item to the top of the agenda and call on the two speakers. This is related to a resolution to designate financial assistance to shelters for victims of domestic violence. Jeff, do you want to tee this up for us for a second, and then we'll have the speakers?
Just very briefly, so this is an annual allocation that we provide related to a fee that's on marriage licenses to go to shelters for domestic violence. And so we do this on an annual basis every year, have Barbara and her team in.
Yes.
And it's always a great partnership that I think we're able to invest in. So really appreciate you being here again, Barbara. Thank you.
We're delighted to have you. Thank you. And I've got two speakers' cards, so feel free.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm Barbara Perez. I'm the president CEO of the YWCA Greater Cincinnati. And this is
Joanna Hall, Director of DV Residential Services.
And so, we've spoken here before, so you know that we operate 2 shelters, one in Hamilton County, one in Claremont County. Our shelter is full every night, 365 days a year. It serves about 65 people a night. That's women, men. We now serve men and children. So just a couple statistics. 1 in 4 women, 24.3%, and 1 in 7 men will experience domestic violence or intimate partner violence in their lifetime. Cincinnati Police Department received over 1,300 calls for domestic violence in Hamilton County alone just last year. So I thought today I'd talk about some of our outcomes, because we talk a lot about the services, but what are the outcomes? So we provided shelter and housing to over 650 survivors of domestic violence and their children. 81% of the survivors developed a safety plan to be prepared in advance for the possibility of future violence, because we know that often there is future violence. It's not an isolated one-time incident. 77% of survivors leaving our temporary housing secured permanent housing, which is a difficult thing in Cincinnati. 62% of the survivors receiving housing and shelter were able to maintain or increase their income during a time of extreme crisis and trauma. We've integrated our workforce development service into the shelters and our transitional living programs, and this has given more opportunities for survivors so that they can do resume building, job coaching, have financial literacy training, and obtain gainful employment. We trained 1,500 individuals on the impact of domestic violence and sexual assault in the last year. And last but not least, our shelter and our services are truly critically important for our communities in saving lives and keeping people safe. So thank you.
And I just wanted to give a brief success story of a client that we had this year. She was a 39-year-old woman with 3 very young children. They were 3, 5, and 6. Her significant other, her husband, had abused her. The first time he apologized. The second time that he abused her, she decided to call our hotline. We got her into the shelter, and her first night there, she said that was the first time that she's been able to sleep in many, many years because of the fear of him hitting her or abusing her as she slept. And then she actually went on, she got her children into daycare where they needed to be. She also was able to find employment once she got childcare for her children, and we have intervention coordinators that actually help and assist with that. And after that, she was able to get into her own home with the help from the YWCA and then also the Ohio Domestic Violence Network. And now she checks in maybe every couple of months with her IC and let them know how she's doing, and she's doing great. The kids are in school. So that's what we do at the YWCA. We provide hope we save lives, and we do our best to serve those that aren't able to speak for themselves in our community. So thank you.
And thank you. We are dependent on this support from the marriage license fees. And thank you
Yes.
to our friends at the Clerk of Courts for your work that you do. So thank you. And thanks for putting us first. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Well, we are so grateful for the work that you're doing in this community for the citizens of Hamilton County. I know we're both intimately familiar with the work you do and the lives that you're saving, not only of the victims of domestic violence themselves, but their children and those associated with them. So thank you so much for what you do. Comments or questions?
Just ditto, thank you for what you do, for sure.
We
Yeah.
appreciate it.
And we have to make sure we recognize them next year when we did Domestic Violence Month. We want to include you in that for sure.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So why don't we move to advance item number 9, which is the resolution to designate financial assistance to shelters for victims of domestic violence. I'm going to move that we approve.
Second,
Yes?
yes.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being
Thank
here.
you so
Have
much,
a great
everyone.
day.
I appreciate it.
Do we need to excuse Todd?
Not because he's coming. He's
But
coming.
can you start a meeting without it?
Yeah.
Can't you do it? You can?
Okay, we've got another speaker's card. Dr. Vlasta Molak there she is. Good afternoon. You've got the pleasure of the floor for 2 minutes.
I just came back from a trip to 6 European countries and Israel, and flew from London. And I did that trip before AOC smart proposal of a green, so-called green New Deal takes effect and eliminates plane travel, as she suggested, then we get a more big government interfering in the Western lives. Anyway, I found out that Europeans are even more nutty than AOC, because they are staging protests in London and in Berlin, and they are sanctifying this histrionic young girl, 16-year-old, who spoke at the United Nations and accused everybody for her histrionic and anxiety, while her parents had allowed her to do that and be used by the activists who don't know their head from their derriere. Anyway, I'm here to talk about the local issues because our wise men had decided that the 60-year-old school buildings all have to be demolished and the new building built at the cost of 10% increase in our real estate rates. That's Finneytown school system. And they think that 60-year-old buildings cannot be fixed to put them up to date, and that it would cost more to fix than to demolish and build new, which is total nonsense, and which we are trying to defeat on Tuesday, the November 5th, because this affects us much more than what's going on in Washington.
Thank you. All right, we have a public hearing to consider sanitary sewer project number 6176, Maple Knoll Drive local sewer. So I'm going to open the hearing so that we can consider this item, and Jack Rennekamp from MSD is coming to the podium. I do want to say that we received, I think through the clerk, a couple of emails related to this item, and so I will give those to you for the record. Good afternoon, Jack.
Commissioners. Jack Rennekamp with Metropolitan Sewer District. This is a hearing continued in progress. The original hearing was established by your board on October 24th, and you decided to continue to today for October 31st. But to reset the stage and to bring everyone up to speed in terms of, again, reiterating the project purpose and the issues, this is for a local sewer for Maple Knoll Drive, between house numbers 9420 and 9562. This hearing is done per requirements of both the Ohio Revised Code as well as MSD rules and regulations. And also to set the stage is that local sewers are not driven by MSD. They're driven by those who want the asset to be installed. So for benefited property owners, either through a petition where 100% of the benefited property owners are supporting it, or if not at that level of support, through a public hearing process based upon a petition. And what MSD does is poll right after that petition's gained to make sure there is a majority level support. So in this case, that's the purpose of why we're here and the basis of why we're here. In the case of the Maple Knoll Drive local sewer, MSD, or your board, adopted a resolution establishing this hearing on August 29. The hearing was advertised in a newspaper of general circulation on September 21 and September 28. And certified mail notice went out to all 10 benefited property owners on August 30th, 2019. As I noted at the last session, the last public hearing last week, 3 certified mail notices were returned as undeliverable, and 1 was never returned. Of course, the U.S. Postal Services were dependent upon them to make these deliveries. However, considering what you had requested MSD to perform last week, we did several actions, one of which is to go out and on the Friday the 25th and put again, letters that were sent out on the 30th of August notifying folks of the hearing, and also the update, today's date, on their doors of all benefited property owners. And for the 3 benefited property owners that we received the letters returned, we also called them. For the 4th benefited property owner, who we don't know why Postal Service did not return any certified mail, we also called them. In each case, we left voicemail messages with the property owner. I made those calls. No property owner returned any calls to me. So at this time, the petition was entered of record on June 29th, 2011. Design services funding, these are prior legislative actions. Design services funding was established on March 28th of 2012. We had a CIP allowance appropriation to the project in May 7th of 2014, and of course, as I mentioned, on the 29th of August, you established the public hearing and also the accompanying legislative actions which deal with levying tentative assessments against the benefited properties, as well as establishing the necessity or public purpose of the hearing and of the project. And with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Aaron Burkhart, who's the project manager, and he can give you a quick summary of, again, the details involved in the project, the specific engineering, and if you have any questions, we'll answer them afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Aaron Burkhart, MSD Project Manager. On the wall behind us is our map showing our location of the project. We're in Coleraine Township, just west of Northgate Mall, right there, along Maple Knoll Drive, right here south of Springdale Road. This project will benefit a total of 10 single-family parcels. Those are all in the blue. The project did receive majority support during polling with 6 in favor, 3 opposed, and 1 non-response. This project includes about 850 linear feet of 8-inch sewer that will drain from the south end of Maple Knoll to the north and discharge into the existing sewer along Springdale Road. We're currently anticipating construction to begin in July of 21 with about a year of construction time. The estimated total project cost is about $925,000 with a per parcel project cost of about $92,500. The estimated property owner assessment per parcel will max out at that $12,000 per rule and reg. So the assessment portion of the total project is $120,000, or about 13% of the total project cost. Then the MSD credits covering anything above that $12,000 are about $80,500 per parcel, totaling $804,500, or about 87% of the total project cost will be in the MSD credits. None of the parcels qualified for the HSTS reimbursement credit defined by Hamilton County Public Health. The costs and credits that I just noted do not include any of the private side costs for each property owner to connect their existing structure to the lateral installed outside of the roadway. These private side costs are covered by each property owner, and it's work done separate from the work that MSD will do typically in the roadway there. Hamilton County Public Health unfortunately couldn't make it today, but reports that the 0 parcels qualified for the HSTS reimbursement credit. 0 properties have orders against them at this time, but 4 parcels do have septic systems that are defined as failed in their system. If we close the public hearing today, the benefited property owners have 5 days to submit comment or questions of the clerk of the board. And following that 5-day period, MSD will present the board with the next series of legislative actions. And since we did receive some comments, one of those will be a disposal of objections to addressing the comments that people have submitted.
Have you seen those emails?
I have, yes.
Okay.
I think I have seen them all.
Okay. Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for a very thorough explanation. Thank you for the follow-up that you did with the residents, that there was some concern about them not having enough information about the hearing and being able to voice their concerns or input. So thanks for doing the follow-up work. I don't have any comments or questions.
Thank you, Madam President. And the hearing, as you said, was delayed because of my concern about the 3 residents that were not able to contact. I'm extremely appreciative of the extra effort that you guys did to make sure that that happened. So I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Okay, yes.
Madam President, if I could just very, very quickly, and I know, Aaron, you had indicated that there were no septic systems in the neighborhood that were able to take advantage of the public health's credit for the for septic systems. But because this is something that only comes up relatively infrequently, and there was a lot of effort a couple of years ago put into defining an additional credit that would be available for septic systems that were of a certain type and standard. We didn't want to force people to pay the full credit, to pay the full amount if their system was essentially working, et cetera. But could you just take a moment to just define what, even though I know there's no one in this particular project that was eligible for it, but just as an opportunity, since this doesn't come up very often, could you just take a moment and describe that public health credit, just so we can kind of get that back on the radar for future?
So the basics of the HSTS reimbursement credit are for newer systems. If someone has installed a newer system, we can lower that $12,000 max assessment a little bit more, depending on the type of system you have, whether it's a discharging or non-discharging system, or if it's a discharging or absorption system. So I will reach out to public health each time and say, hey, does anyone recently, put in a new system, and then it lowers that $12,000 amount. Either, I believe it's $3,600 or $5,200. So we can go down, $12,000 minus $3,600 or $12,000 minus $5,200.
Right, and I just wanted to make that clear, because whether it's now or in the future, one of the primary complaints we'd always gotten in these projects was residents coming back and saying, I literally just bought a new system, and these things are very expensive. And so we worked with MSD and Public Health, and it was a very cooperative, inclusive effort to say, okay, when we have those types of situations, is there an additional credit that we can provide? We still have to, we still have to do the project, and people still have to tap in. But let's acknowledge the fact that even though someone has a system that may be outdated, it may not be what we want from an environmental perspective and emissions perspective into the water. We at least want to acknowledge that fact and provide an additional credit for that, and that's what Aaron just described. So just for future reference, if that comes up, I just wanted to make sure the board was aware of that.
Thank you.
Madam President,
Yeah.
what is considered a newer system? How old would that be? 10 years?
I think it might be 10 years. I tend to defer to public health and their knowledge of what the systems are, because they'll do all
Okay.
that permitting. Bill Wooten's coming up.
Oh, Bill.
He's my,
Good afternoon.
Bill Wooten, MSD.
Yeah.
There was a new water quality standards adopted in about 2004. So what public health looks at is, does the new system meet those new water quality standards?
Okay.
And so systems
Okay.
built around 2004, a little earlier, a little later.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Thanks for that information, it's very helpful. Okay, are there any further comments
No
or questions?
further questions,
All right,
uh-huh.
so I'm then going to move to close the hearing. Yeah, make that motion?
Second.
Yes?
Yes.
Thank you. And then if you could prepare the legislation for us for our next meeting, we'd be grateful. All right? Thank you.
5 days, yes.
For the additional
There's a
notification to
statutory
the
5-day
residents.
time
Yeah.
period,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you for doing that. We've got a number of regular agenda items, so we'll mix it up a little bit here and have the engineer come forward for items number 1 and 2.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Time flies when you're
Yeah, I
having
guess
fun.
it does, yeah.
Time flies when you're having fun. The first item we have for you is the resolution to authorize an agreement with W.E. Smith Construction to correct the Cliff Road slide. Now, Cliff Road slide is something that we've been concerned about, and we had it proposed for calendar year 2020. We moved it to calendar year 2019, and we are fast-tracking that as much as possible to get that taken care of. So we've taken bids, and the bid amounts $299,472, and obviously it's something that we want to move forward with. We've already even had a pre-construction meeting just so that we can get the contractor out as soon as possible. Item 2 pertains to a resolution that would establish Kugler Mill Road between Blue Ash Road and Sycamore Road. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
So this Kugler Mill item is the one that we have already discussed.
Yes, it's been the subject of the public meetings and testimony, so on and so forth from citizens. Mhm.
Okay. So, and we had the public hearing, and this is the resolution that
This is the resolution,
the
yes.
result of that public hearing.
That's correct,
Okay.
and the supporting documents as well.
Right,
And we've
okay.
met with the people who had questions, comments, and so on and so forth. The vast majority of the issues have been resolved.
Okay. All right, very good. Are there any questions or comments?
No questions.
All right, very good, thank you. Then I will move to approve of items numbers 1 and 2 on the regular agenda.
Second.
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, Ted.
Thanks, Commissioners. Have a great Halloween.
You as well. All right, MSD, you're back up. There are a lot of items on relative to MSD, items 3 through 8. And there are large dollar amounts here. So Jack, could you walk us through these, please?
Of course.
Thank you.
So item 3 is a request that the board enter into its record our 2020 fee schedule. Under MSD's rules and regulations, there are certain fees that are on an annual increase basis, and that increase is predicated upon the Engineering News Record's Cost of Construction Index for Cincinnati for local construction costs. This is established in Section 2501 of MSD Rules and Regulations, and those fees relate to certain items. Those are as-built drawings, sewer tapper licenses, holding tank discharge fees, holding tank waste disposal fees, one-time discharge permit, and construction inspection. When the current version of the rules and regulations were adopted in 2001, this provision was placed by the board at that time to have this as an automatic increase based upon this criteria. And so that's item number 3, and the request is to enter it into your record. Item number 4 is the wastewater collection high-risk asset allowance. This request is to increase the appropriated budget for this particular allowance project by $1.555 million from $7 million to $8.555 million, and to legislate a similar amount from the 2019 building sewers allowance that both are in the 2019 MSD CIP. There's sufficient funding in the building sewers allowance to take away that amount and to reallocate it to the high-risk asset allowance. Approximately one-half of 2019 work orders are for high-risk asset repairs for the wastewater collection division for our collection system, and high-risk asset work cannot be delayed for execution, so the request is to continue that work to be funded for the balance of 2019 through this, some would call it a transfer, but it's a reallocation.
I want to ask a quick question about that. So what qualifies as a high-risk asset as opposed to our regular, maintenance of the asset?
Mary Lynn will.
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I can just briefly try to explain that. So we have a very sophisticated model that we use, and a model, I shouldn't say it's not a computer model, it's a methodology that we use to assess sewers. So we televise sewer, we inspect them, and determine, using industry standards, best industry standards, to determine which ones are at highest risk of failure or criticality of failure, and try to address those before they actually fail. And we, as you know, we have different allowances within wastewater collection division, and so we have the high risk allowance fund is to try to do this stuff before it fails. Because once we're fixing something when it's failed, it's going to cost more, and those are addressed through an emergency allowance. So essentially, this is a budget-neutral transfer from the building sewers to the high risk, because we haven't even been able to assess all of our sewers. So I believe that we've actually only assessed about a half of them, because again, we have 3,000 miles of sewers from New York to California. That's how many miles of sewers we have. So of those we've assessed, we have really hundreds of miles that are in the type of shape that they need to have some kind of repairs done to them, whether they're lining, whether they're point repairs, and we do a lot of that work proactively under this particular allowance. And we've almost completed the funding that we have for this year is almost spent in doing those proactive repairs, yet we have a lot more that we need to do. So if we don't want to spend as much on emergencies and then have to, pull people and contracts off of the planned work, which at this point in time, we wouldn't be able to continue doing the planned work for the remainder of this year. That's why the budget neutral transfer from building sewers is a benefit for everybody, because it helps us rehab those assets that we know that are at critical risk. So age has an impact. It could be slope. It could be condition. The materials that sewer was particularly made with. We still have brick sewers. We're doing a major rehab of the major interceptor that goes from takes waste from the Mill Creek to the Mill Creek treatment plant. We're doing a major rehab of that particular sewer right now. Really need to rehab these things before they ultimately fail, and that's what we try to do with this allowance.
Are the majority of the high-risk sewers, are they in a certain geography? Or I'm assuming they're in the older neighborhoods, right? Of the city. Is that accurate, or are they all over?
They could be all over. Yes, it depends on age. Age is a factor, but other factors could be a reason why something is high risk. It could be that it is serving, University Hospital or Children's Hospital or Mercy Hospital. It could have other factors of risk that result it being categorized as a high risk. So it's, but primarily it's about. It's a high likelihood of failure, and then what the consequence is to that failure. If it's really big, such as, it's serving a hospital or some other area, then we give that one a higher priority. And so, as you know, we have all kinds of different uses all throughout the region or district, and so of the sewers that we're inspecting and analyzing, for those that have risks associated with them, we're trying to prioritize those and get those addressed before they fail.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the explanation.
Yep.
Appreciate it. All right, Jack.
I think that's yours.
Yep.
We're on item 5.
We're on item 5, yes, Commissioner. So this is Berkeley Avenue sewer replacement. The request to the board is for construction funding, $729,000 for construction, and this is a 2019 CIP project. It was in the approved 2019 CIP. The construction is to address 6 segments of deteriorated 1926 existing combined sewer. So it's approaching 100 years of lifespan. And there have been some cost increases in the project, in the design, due to design cost estimates versus what we call book estimates, or the CIP, when it was first presented to the board. So there's some change in that. Item number 6 is Pardee Alley sewer replacement. It's also in the 2019 approved CIP. The request is, to the board, is to fund $217,000 for construction. This construction will address a failing and compromised sewer segments of an late 1800s combined stone sewer that still is in use, but portions have failed. Number 7, item number 7 for MSD is CSO 408 and 413, high water, dry weather protection, a mouthful. This project is also in the 2019 CIP. It is a bridge project as well, as a part of the consent decree. The request is for $3.4 million for construction, and the construction is to provide protection to keep river water out of the combined sewer outfall while the river is high, but the surrounding sewer shed may be dry. So high water, but dry weather. It also improves overflow control. That this project will accomplish that. And item number 8 is a request to your board to grant an exception to the Rules and Regulations Article 2, Section 206, which deals with construction over sewers. The petitioner, who owns the property at 3112 Price Avenue in East Price Hill, requests to build a deck over an existing sewer from the late 19th, early 20th century, and to, we would call it a variance, but we need an exception to allow any structure to be, a permanent structure to be built over a public sewer. And that's per the rules and regulations.
Is that literally over a manhole?
It's over a portion, diagonal segment of the existing sewer.
Okay.
So what we consider in these is, does it have any impact to the sewer's access for MSD? Does it have any impact to the sewer's loading, the existing state of the sewer? If it's a heavy structure, how is that going to affect the sewer's stability? We also look at any potential cost, if there are impacts, and what could happen, and who should bear that cost then.
Okay. Thank you. That is the extent of the MSD items. I know Karen Ball is in the room. Karen, do you want to come forward and offer any perspective? Karen is the Hamilton County Oversight Team. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. All I will say is that all of these items in front of you today are consistent with the approved 2019 CIP and or the rules and regulations that have been adopted by the board.
Thank you. All right, thank you all for the information.
Madam
Are there any
President?
comments or
Yeah,
questions?
just a couple
Yes.
questions. I noticed on item 5 and 6 that we asked for $729,000, but as I look through the information, the total cost is $996,000. So is funding coming from another area? And also in number 6, we asked for $217,000, and it's actually $435,000. So the funding for the additional monies are coming from where?
So for items 5 and 6, there were prior approvals as well as the current request, which is the $729,000 and the $217,000. The prior and the current total, the amounts that you indicated, Commissioner, the prior approval has already been funded by the board in the past. To get the design and any pre-planning work and planning work, as well as pre-construction services, which is typically MSD labor, any right-of-way if necessary, get all of that out of the way so we can move to and progress to construction.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Very
I have
good.
nothing else.
Okay. So I am then going to move that we approve of regular agenda items 3 through 8.
Second,
Yes?
yes.
Thank you. We've already dealt with item number 9, and so we've got consent agenda items 10 through 20. Are there any questions or comments on any of these items?
I have no questions on those items.
All right, I'm going to move that we approve of consent agenda items 10 through 20.
Second,
Yes?
yes.
Thank you. We have a travel item requesting authorization to travel to, at the county's expense. The treasurer, 1 employee to Columbus, and the coroner has 1 employee going to Kansas City. Move to
Second,
approve, sorry.
sorry. Second,
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I skipped right over the beginning of the agenda, which are comments and motions. And so let's move to that portion of the agenda. Commissioner Summer Dumas?
Thank you, Madam President. Just a few comments. I've been fairly busy this week. I went to WCPO to do an interview with This Week in Cincinnati last week, actually, and it was as it relates to the sales tax and the budget. And so we hopefully have clarified some things for our constituents. Also attended the State of the City address where Commissioner Todd Pertune was recognized. And then I attended the Montgomery Quarter groundbreaking ceremony, which President Driehaus was also there. They will be building condos and apartments, and there will be some restaurants in that area. And I also listened to the elected officials' webinar as it relates to our census that is coming up and what impact we can have as a government to make sure we get everybody counted. An additional item that I did was Emergency Management Agency Executive Committee meeting to make sure that we're aware of all the emergency strategies that are being used in our area to keep all of us safe. And then I attended the Northside Transit Center groundbreaking. It's going to be an awesome location, event necessary for transportation. They've been working on it for a couple of years, and I was excited to be a part of that groundbreaking. And lastly, attended the Hamilton County Land Reutilization Board of Directors meeting yesterday to look at some of the housing options that they are presenting in the community and rehab and redevelopment, so that was interesting. I'd like to make a couple comments as it relates to several major projects that have come up since I've been here for my 9 months. Discussions were done years ago, a few years ago, some longer, as it relates to FCC, the Millennium, the sales tax, and the banks. So because a lot of those major projects had already been in action, what I do as a representative of those who have put me in this seat is to lend my voice to the discussion. I can't and don't choose to stop projects in the middle. You don't want to build half of a house. So I am here as projects have already started. So I will lend my voice, but I won't stop something that has already been already started. So I am, and I want to say again, I'm definitely in opposition of the deal with the Millennium. I've said it once, I'll say it twice, but that may not indicate that I can say no on it because it's in the middle of a process, but I'd still say that it's a terrible deal. And so I just want people to know, and the people that are listening, that not to think that I'm changing my mind on issues, but as a project has already been started and almost in the middle of development, banks or whatever it is, that I can't stop something in the middle that's already been started, but I can lend my voice to it, and that's what I plan to do while I'm here. So that'll end my report.
Thank you. I have a couple of items. I traveled to Columbus again yesterday related to the opioid settlement. And as many of you know, Hamilton County, along with the city of Cincinnati, sued the distributors because of the destruction that's been caused in our community and the strains, particularly on county services and emergency services related to the city and EMTs. And so the idea is to try to find an approach that is as collaborative and as inclusive as possible, recognizing that some of the communities in Ohio were harder hit than others, and some, frankly, have higher populations than others. And so any kind of formula where we do something collective should reflect that. And so, as you know, Cuyahoga and Summit have settled their lawsuit with the distributors, and they have gotten some resources for those strains that I'm just talking about. But there was a lot of conversation about how the state and local jurisdictions can work together. So our attorneys counties were in the room. There were a number of county commissioners from all different kinds of counties, urban, large, small, southeast Ohio, southwest, to the north. And so, as you might imagine, there's a diversity of thought in that room because we represent really different types of communities and different parts of the state, but we are trying to do something collective with the state of Ohio to make sure that we do see some of those dollars for, you know, the things that we have provided as a result of the opioid epidemic, primarily related to the jail overcrowding issue, the retrofit that we're doing, the court system that is overburdened with many people entering the court system that wouldn't have otherwise, and the Child Protective Services part of the job of JFS. And so there are ongoing negotiations and discussions, and so it's very interesting. I'm happy to represent not only Hamilton County, but really the larger urban counties. Franklin County is also in the room, and so I will continue to give these updates because I think it's really important that we stay on top of this because many other states are starting to organize in the same way. And if Ohio can get out in front of the curve and kind of go to the top of the list, I think that's definitely to our benefit. So we are doing some work, and it's happening on a weekly basis. It's not terribly convenient because it's always in Columbus. But so far I've been able to clear my calendar and go up, so I'll continue to provide updates as we go. Some other things that Commissioner Summer-Odumas mentioned, I also attended the Montgomery groundbreaking. Am I right? It was a groundbreaking. Yeah, it's not a ribbon cutting. But the county was a partner in that project in a number of different ways. And so the one that I think is most interesting is the roundabout that's going to be created. It's right off of Cross County Highway leading into the Montgomery corridor and kind of into the business district there. And it's a new approach for Hamilton County and a bit of a test case. But when we had this groundbreaking, I had just gotten back from Colorado where my daughter lives, and we had been on roundabout after roundabout in Denver, and they work just fine. And so I know that it is a bit of a new approach, and I know people have some trepidation about it, but it is a more relaxed way to enter an intersection. It's really interesting. And so I'm looking forward to see how that moves forward in Montgomery, because it is a bit of a pilot for Hamilton County, and the TID participated in the funding for that. There were many partners on all parts of this project in Montgomery, not only on the transportation-related piece and the roundabout, but also in the business district part. And so Hamilton County was able to participate in that because we have been committed to some funding through the TID so that we can partner, especially when it comes to transportation projects. So it was a great crowd out there. There was a lot of energy. It was very well done. And so I think we're all looking forward to the final project there. I also, on behalf of the county, attended the Chinese Chamber event. Robert Bell was there. And remember, the Chinese Chamber is part of our Inclusion Council, and so, as is the Indian Chamber, the African American Chamber, the Latino Chamber. And so we intentionally have these groups sitting at the table to serve in an advisory role when we talk about inclusion and what it means to be inclusive in Hamilton County. And so the Chinese Chamber had a session of their own over at HCDC, and Robert was there and Harry Blanton was there to talk about how the Chinese Chamber members, these small business owners, can better partner with the county. And they were asking, they were very curious. It's a bit of a new day in Hamilton County for this kind of work because we haven't aggressively, I think, gone into these rooms and said, we want to help, we want to partner, call on us, right? And so I thought it was really an interesting group, and I'm hopeful, Robert, that we will be doing this then with the other chambers. There we go, that sit on the Inclusion Council. And remember, the Inclusion Council is not only the chambers that are usually associated with small business or business-related things, but we also have members of the DD community, people with disabilities on that commission. We have women's groups on that commission. And so when we talk about diversity, it's ethnicity, it's also gender, and it's also relative to people's ability in this community. So we're very proud of the work, and so thank you, Robert, for the invitation and for convening that group together. And lastly, there is something happening right now. I know the deadline's tomorrow, but the capital budget is current. The projects are currently underway to be submitted. And so in Hamilton County, we have a process primarily dictated through the state. It is the state's capital budget. These are dollars that are distributed every other year through the cap budget process. And the governor's office and the legislature have determined that the projects that will move forward or be considered in Hamilton County move through a process that's been established over a number of years, and it involves the CBC, the CRBC, the Chamber, and others. And so a task force gets together to vet the projects, and the applications are due tomorrow. And so I know many folks in communities are aware of this deadline. I know I've been approached by a couple of communities that have community projects that they would like to have included. And so that information, Jeff, is it on our website?
State capital grant process information?
Well,
or?
and if not, you can call my office,
Yeah,
which is on the website, and my staff is well aware of how this works, and so there is an application that needs to be filled out. I know the county will be offering some projects, as will the city of Cincinnati, and then some of the local jurisdictions. And so it'll be interesting to see. There are always really interesting projects that bubble up through the capital budget process, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what those projects are. And generally, Southwest Ohio will get around 20 million, depends on, the will of the legislature and the governor. But I am hopeful that we will see at least as much as we had in the last go-around, because these dollars, in partnership with local dollars, can be really catalytic when it comes to economic development projects, large and small, in this community. And so that process is underway. Deadline tomorrow for the applications, and then the meetings will ensue. And I don't know what the end date is for all this, when we should expect to have the final list.
Typically, so we will, as you indicated, the deadline for submitting applications to the process is tomorrow, November 1st. There will then be a presentation process that will happen probably closer to Thanksgiving. We'll have some idea on a capital grant allocation sometime early in the year next year, and ultimately allocations happen closer to mid-spring, summer even. So, but we'll know something about the projects that we put in some late this year, early next.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, and to be clear, it has to go through the legislative process. So all we do locally is recommend projects, and the local state delegation will get involved in making their own recommendations. Sometimes they align, sometimes they do not. But it's an interesting process, and so we'll continue to update as that moves forward. And again, if anybody has any questions or comments about that, or would like to get involved, contact my office, and we'll be happy to push out that application and the information related to that. So that is all I have. Jeff, I know you've got a couple of by-leave items.
I do. First, just before I introduce a couple of by-leaves, just a couple of comments. Number one, Commissioner Summer Dumas, Commissioner Driehaus, you were both, I think, both at the Montgomery groundbreaking. And I also just want to indicate that in addition to the TID interaction there, that a lot of that property that Montgomery is using for that is property that was that we partnered with Montgomery to make available to them so that they could move forward with not only phase one but phase two of that Gateway Economic Development Project. So for those who are watching out there who aren't interested in the county gifting property for economic development projects, it was not gifted. But it was, in fact, sold it was through a negotiation process with the city of Montgomery at a level that both provided capital income to the county and at the same time facilitated the development of that and the advancement of that project. So it was a win-win really for both entities. So I just wanted to comment on that. Secondly, Commissioner Summer Dumas indicated that she was over at a local media outlet talking about the budget, and there's one thing I just wanted to use this opportunity to indicate, because I've seen a few things in the media talking, and I know some of the commissioners had answered this in their op-eds into the Inquirer recently, but there were some comments and questions about if the county's budget deficit is X, why are they asking for a sales tax that produces more than X? And I think as we indicated in the budget, we indicated in all the public hearings as well, that the $20 million deficit relates to 2020, and that we are rolling on programs and we are fixing that deficit in 2020, and then there's some additional fixes to that deficit that roll on in 2021. So for instance, to address the 911 funding and the 911 funding system issue, part of that fix rolls on in 2020. The remainder of that fix rolls on in 2021. We have roughly $200 million of deferred capital maintenance in the county. Part of the fix to that rolls on in 2020. An additional portion rolls on in 2021. So we wanted to be, we wanted to acknowledge the fact that with the union terminal tax rolling off, we did not want to load the entire fix to these issues into 2020, or else we would have had to advance that sales tax earlier, and for a period of time, people would have seen an increase in their sales tax rate. So we didn't want that to happen. So I just wanted to provide that because there's been a lot of, if I've heard anything, that's been the one question I've heard as to why there is that difference between the stated structural deficit and the amount that rolls on in 2021. So wanted to make that.
Let me just interject
Sure.
something by way of clarity, and I hope it's helpful. So remember that in the last budget cycle, the 20 million of that was related to cuts or use of one-time revenue, restricted funds and that kind of thing. But there was 8 million that was covered through increases to the local communities. And so the 911 fee went up, the property transfer fee went up, and so we had to do some things. Not all of the $28 million in the last cycle were cut. Some of it was increased cost to our local partners. And so what we're trying to do is not only plug the 20 million, but also say to our local partners, if we can have the 0.25 of a penny roll on in spring of 2020, we want to be better partners with the 911 system and related to the property transfer fee. And so that looks like, and remember that, anecdotally, we heard a story about what they're doing in Colerain Township, which is a little scary because we've got this great coordinated 911 system, best in class from all accounts, very efficient, very well done, and coordinated in the county. And but there's an expense to that to our local partners when residents call that 911 number and people respond. And so in Colerain, they told us they've got residents calling a different number if the resident deems that it's not an emergency instead of calling 911 to lower cost. And so they admitted that that's a difficult solution to a difficult financial problem that they face, and they would much prefer to not have any confusion there and have people call 911 in the case that it's an emergency and you need a quick response. And so we are trying to lower the burden on the local community by saying the county's partnership with you will be at a higher level to maintain this coordinated system, and there's a cost to that, and is it 3.5 or so? Something like that.
In terms of the additional cost,
Yes.
the cost to fully fund the
Collective cost.
The collective, yeah. So there's around 285,000 details a year. So the $11 to drop it all the way down to from $16 detail rate to $5, yes, is roughly $3.1 million.
Right. So there are other dynamics here other than just plugging a budget hole. There are other things that we're trying to accomplish. And as you run, and you've said it, you run the pro forma out a few years with the nature of the maintenance costs that have been deferred for many years, and I don't know if you've seen the bag on the building outside. there's a bag on the building outside. In the building we're sitting in, there's plastic so that what's falling off of the building doesn't hit somebody on the head. So that's how desperate this is. We had the same thing over at Alms and Depke last year,
And
we've
800
got it
Broadway.
over at 800 Broadway as well. So these are real-time issues that are in desperate need of attention, in addition to just the nature of, increased personnel costs and, health benefits and all that kind of
Sure.
stuff. So thanks for bringing that up. I
You're
appreciate it.
welcome. And before I get to a couple of the specific by-leaves, just wanted to thank a couple of people. Number one, I think the board has mentioned this in the past, but Trina Jackson and the one-stop shop that she's working on over at the Justice Center with Maura Weir from JFS and a lot of other private providers is doing really great work. I think they had 175 people or so through last time, and I've just heard anecdotal stories from Trina about some people that have been connected directly with services and into treatment and other wraparound services immediately. So that program that was supported and envisioned by the board is beginning to pay dividends immediately. So I just wanted to thank the board for that. And as I start to get into the by-leaves here, I'm going to call James Noyes up because James is going to walk us through two of the by-leaves that we have here. There are some resolutions related to some of the actions and hearings the board has had. But before I turn it over to James on this, I do want to congratulate James and Cindy Rutherford. Cindy, longtime employee of the Department of Planning and Development. It's called a lot of different things in the past. But James and Cindy together were recently awarded the Conservation Partner of the Year Award from the Soil and Water Conservation District for the work that they did implementing the Earthworks fee program through the Soil and Water Conservation District, which makes sure that we have the ability to go out. If anyone has ever lived by or traveled through a construction site, driven on the roads, et cetera, you know that when not done correctly, there can be a lot of soil erosion, there can be a lot of mud on the roads, that type of thing. That's a real nuisance to surrounding property owners. The Earthworks program is one of the things that helps prevent that, and James and Cindy Rutherford were instrumental in putting together a funding structure that helps ensure that program is adequately funded. So I just wanted to congratulate James and also Cindy Rutherford in absentia for all of their work on that. So thank you, James. And if you want to just take a moment, we have two items here related to the Harrison Avenue Hotel and also the Hillsinger development that was the reconsideration. Both of these were out in Green Township, but James, if you want to just take a moment and walk through these for the board.
Great. Thank you, Jeff, very much. I appreciate it. Last week at the board meeting, you held a public hearing for both of these resolutions that are in front of you, the Harrison Avenue Hotel site, 4-acre site, and the reconsideration of the Hillsinger development on Race Road. That was a 2002 project. At that meeting, you had closed the public hearing and asked for a resolution to be brought forth for you. Today, you have that resolution in front of you, and I'm here for any questions in regards to that.
Questions or comments?
I have no questions.
Jeff, were you leaning forward?
I'm sorry?
I thought you were leaning forward.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I was not. I may have, but it wasn't related
Okay,
to
very
that.
good. All right, so yes, we've had public hearings about both of these, closed the hearings. These are the resolutions as a result of our request. So I am going to move that we approve of resolution authorizing a zoning map amendment for Case Green 2019-07, Harrison Avenue Hotel from an A residence to double E planned retail.
Second.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And I'm also going to move that we approve of the resolution authorizing a reconsideration of the zoning map amendment for Case Green 2002-06, Hillsinger Development from C residence to 00, or I guess that's 00, planned office.
Second.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. The additional by-leave items I have are related to, and on Tuesday, we had a staff meeting presentation related to the advancing of the headquarter hotel. Commissioner Summer Dumas referenced it briefly in her by-leave comments. There's three items here. There's really two essential actions of the board. I know Roger Friedman is here from the prosecutor's office. I wanted to pulse the board as to how you'd like to proceed with this. We could have Roger walk through. These are by-leave items. I did reference each of them in the presentation, in the staff meeting presentation on Tuesday, that allow us to continue forward with our efforts on the headquarter hotel. So I just wanted to defer to the board as to how you want to walk through these.
Yeah, well, Roger, why don't you come forward? And are there three, Jeff?
Yeah, so there's 3 documents in front of you, and I won't steal Roger's thunder, but there is a
Steal as much as you want, Jeff.
there is a resolution related to an agreement with the Port Authority related to the provision of an additional grant for earnest funding as required under the purchase-sale agreement that was assigned by Vanderkar to the Port Authority. There's 2 items related to that. There's there's the resolution that the board will be acting on, and then there is the actual agreement that we will execute with the Port Authority. So there's 2 items there, but you're really only acting on the resolution.
Correct.
That correct, Roger?
That's correct.
Anything else you wanted to say about that one?
Let me interject for a second, because I know Commissioner Portune is on his way. I'm wondering if we should recess for a short time. I think he's literally on his way, so that he can participate in this conversation. So with your deference, Commissioner, I would like to call a short recess, and my understanding is it will be no more than 10 minutes, and then take up these items to make sure Commissioner Portune's in the room for, the explanation of the 3 resolutions. Is that okay?
2 resolutions.
I'm sorry, I keep saying that. There are 3 items, 2 resolutions.
Right, happy to.
Okay, so I am going to move that we go into a short recess. How do they say it? 10 minutes, more or less. Do we need to make a motion to do it?
Yeah, right.
All right, I've made the motion to do that.
Second.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you. All right, we will reconvene in about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. Just, Roger, I'm just trying to save you.
Thank you.
Explanation. We've got 3 items in front of us, by leave items offered by the county administrator. So let's get some background here.
Sure. Todd, how you doing?
Hey, Roger. Glad to be here.
Glad you're here.
Thank you.
Commissioners, actually, there are really just 2 items. One of them has 2 parts to it, but
Okay.
just 2 items. And the first item relates to additional earnest money payment with regard to the potential acquisition of the Millennium Hotel. Laura Brenner from the Port was here on Tuesday explaining, I think, to the board the situation with regard to the additional earnest money deposit that needs to be made under the terms of the purchase and sale agreement that was assigned to the Port Authority by Vandekar. A second deposit in the amount of $1.3 million became due under the terms of the contract when the owner of the hotel or its manager provided notice to the employees, what's called a warn notice, that it was potential that the hotel was going to sell and that the hotel would be closed down. That notice was given to the employees a little sooner, I think, than anyone expected that it was going to be. There was always a belief that the hotel would continue to operate until it actually was sold. And now the hotel has apparently given notice to the employees that the potential closing of the hotel will occur at an earlier date, which brings about a requirement to make the second earnest money payment. That payment could be due as early as November 6th, next week, or it could be a later date. I know that the Port Authority is still working on trying to get an extension of that time. But in the event that the payment is due to be made on November the 6th, we need to get to the authority of the board to expend that additional $1.3 million for the second earnest money payment to be made. And the resolution that's in front of you, as well as the agreement that goes with it, is nearly identical to the first resolution and agreement that the board adopted a little bit, right around a month ago, that calls for the $1.3 million to be paid out of the residual funds that the county holds from its transient occupancy taxes. And it's treated as a grant to the port, the idea being that the payment of the $1.3 million is being made with the idea that if the development of the new hotel goes forward, that the county would be reimbursed out of the development dollars that come in to develop the new hotel. So the first item is a resolution authorizing that second grant agreement with the port to be able to make that $1.3 million. That pretty much is it in a nutshell.
Commissioners, if you'd like, I could, I'm sorry, I turned my mic off. I can go briefly into what the second item is as well. And the second item is, and this relates to, on Tuesday, we had talked about the idea of a backup strategy or contingency strategy or a plan B if in fact the due diligence from the port comes back and says that the broader hotel redevelopment project is not feasible from an economic or constructability perspective, that this still gave the board the continued ability to get the property out of private control and into public control using using county residual occupancy tax dollars. So what this resolution does is, if in fact we find ourselves in that situation, again, recognizing that Plan A is still the hotel redevelopment project as initially pitched by Vandekar, but if we found ourselves with the need to, from a timing perspective or because of what the due diligence says, execute a different strategy, this allows us to be flexible and implement that. This allows me to negotiate an agreement with the Port Authority and with the CFA to allow for the flow of those dollars into the project in that way. So that's what this does. It is not a full cooperative agreement. It is just a resolution that gives me the authority to negotiate that agreement on behalf of the board to allow for the flow of those dollars.
Thank you. All right, so we need an action of the board to release the rest of the earnest money. I do want to say that this was contemplated at the very beginning.
It was.
In order to move forward with either Plan A or Plan B. And so technically then, we've got a resolution and then we've got an agreement associated with the resolution. And I will open it up for comments and questions. I just want to know, are we passing the resolution and the agreement together, or does the agreement simply become part of the attachment to the resolution?
The agreement would be an attachment to the
Okay.
resolution.
Okay.
You're authorizing the execution of that agreement with the port.
Okay, very good. Are there comments or questions?
Madam President, just the comment that I've made before, I'm not in agreement with this project, and just wanted to say that again.
Thank you. Commissioner Portun.
Madam President, thank you very much. I won't belabor the point. I've gone into great detail as to why I think this is important. This is one of the largest blighted areas in downtown Cincinnati. We've got to eliminate that blight. If we don't move forward with this, then we lose again our opportunity to control the site, to control the area. And this is not just a big downtown development. This has to do with so much about small business, about jobs, entry-level positions. You go to any other city for a convention or business, stay at their hotels, go to their convention centers, and look around. I'm always make it a point to do that, to see all the people who are working at those places, in those convention centers, at those hotels. And not only are they good jobs, the individuals that are involved in them do great work. They take those dollars back to their communities and spend them in their communities. And so the ripple effect of what we are doing here is huge. It's significant. And again, I'm well on record in support of this project, why it's necessary and critical. I'm happy to be here today. I thank you for the accommodations you've made in order for me to be able to vote and be here to vote on this in a timely basis. If there's one thing that we're supposed to do as commissioners, it's to show up and vote on the important votes. And so, again, thank you all for helping to work with the timing and the scheduling and everything so that I could lend my support to this, and I look forward to voting for it.
We're glad to have you here,
Thank you.
Commissioner Portun.
Forgive me for being so far away, but I think we all understand.
We got you. We got you. All right, very good. So I, with that, will move that we approve of the resolution authorizing an agreement with the Port of Greater Cincinnati Development Authority.
Second.
Commissioner Dreehouse?
Yes.
Commissioner Summer-Dumas?
No.
Commissioner Fortune?
Yes.
Thank you. The second resolution is the one that Jeff described, and I'll read the title. So I will move to approve the resolution authorizing Hamilton County to enter into a cooperative agreement with the Port of Greater Cincinnati Development Authority and the Convention Facilities Authority for Hamilton County, Ohio, in order to provide for further use of Hamilton County's residual funds derived from the transient occupancy tax.
Second.
Yes.
Commissioner Summer-Dumas?
No.
Commissioner Fortune?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Portun, I know you just came in, but that does complete our agenda other than our executive sessions.
Yes.
So would you like to have the mic before I move that we go into executive session?
I would, if you don't
Yes,
mind.
absolutely.
Madam President, didn't have a chance to participate in the by-leaves earlier for commissioners' comments and the like. There are really three things I want to share today. Number one is a little more than a year ago, we adopted a resolution that appointed members of the Hamilton County Oral Health Coalition. I'd like to submit before the board an amendment to that resolution. I'll make sure we get this prepared in writing, and it will be properly submitted and voted on. But I'd like to add to that resolution and add to the OHC Mr. Eric Kearney. Mr. Kearney is taken over duties at the TID, as you know, on my behalf, and I'd like to ask Mr. Kearney to join. I'm not stepping down off of the OHC, but I do think that his is a voice that is an important one. Certainly, he and I are lockstep on these issues, and I think that his will be a presence on the OHC that will be important and very helpful. And of course, he has tremendous State House experience as well. That's also going to be helpful to us as we engage with a variety of state agencies relative to our ongoing efforts at addressing issues of inaccessibility to oral health care and the like. So I'll submit that at the within a week. We'll get that reduced to writing in the resolution and get that submitted.
Madam President?
Yes.
Can we make a motion from the floor as it relates to that? Is that inappropriate?
I would suggest, considering the original one was done by resolution and you have
Uh-huh.
to put it on there, it's probably
Yes.
more appropriate to do that as amendment to that official resolution, written resolution.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I asked if we could, from the floor, make a motion to have Eric Kearney added to the OHC, and he was saying we should do a resolution.
Yeah, I'd prefer
Okay.
to make sure we cover it that way.
Okay.
But thank you for the suggestion, Madam Vice President. Second, I'll be formalizing this as well, but I did want to share, there's been speculation about what my last day of employment will be here. Jeff, you're going to have to help me with the proper way to go about doing this. But in any event, I'm going to give notice, and the reason for this timing has to do with a variety of things, not the least of which is to make sure that I'm still able to get at least a portion of my pension from OPERS when all said and done. But my effective last date of employment will be no later than December 31st of this year. So I just wanted to share that so that we can all start to prepare and get ready for a transition that will certainly occur thereafter. And again, we'll get to the formalization of all of that. It's proper documentation and everything. But it is important for people to know what's going on relative to my ongoing service here. And I'll have a lot more to say about that when the time comes, but it will be no later than December 31st of this year. And at last, I wanted to speak briefly to the issue of the banks and the music venue and this business that's going on with the city and the mayor and rezoning and all these other things that are occurring. I've learned certainly from not just news accounts, but hearing from others about steps that are being taken place potentially by the city at the instruction of the mayor to rezone the banks in ways that will create even more obstacles for the completion of the banks in a joint and collaborative way with the city. And in particular, for us to be able to complete things that are already in play and in place. We all know that the county has done everything it can, and everything that should be required of it. The city's changing the rules of the game now, is what's going on. But we've done everything that we can in order to be able to move forward with construction of the music venue at the banks. If the city continues in the path that it is pursuing, it's going to further delay the onset of construction. Certain contracts will not be able to be let. All that's going to mean is, again, more delay, more loss of jobs, more loss of revenues, more loss of foot traffic at the banks, more loss of everything that everybody that's already at the banks and has been asking for us to do, to get done. And logic does not allow for a description or an explanation is a better way to put it. There's no logical explanation for what the city is doing and the steps that the mayor is taking. No logical explanation whatsoever. And it's got to stop. It has to stop. This declaration of war by the city against the county at the banks has got to stop. We have had 20 years of collaborative work with the city, joint steering committees, dating back before the current Joint Bank Steering Committee, the original one, where all the planning was done at the convention center in the late 90s. A very collaborative, cooperative effort between the city and the county. Nobody was fighting. The county was freely donating property to make the banks work. All sorts. I won't go through. The history is there if anybody wants to dig it up and look at it. And then in 2007, in an historic 11-month time period, the city and the county got together after 7 years of false starts and missed starts and no starts at the banks, and the city and the county got together. And in particular, Mark Mallory, with the support of the council, and I, as president of the board, with the support of our full commission, which at the time was David Pepper and Pat DeWine, and we all got together, and in 5 months after the start of 2007, we had inked a deal with the developer that had eluded us and evaded us up until that point in time, repeatedly. And then 6 months thereafter, at a joint session of, historic joint session of the city and the county at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, we had a unanimous execution of the joint city-county development agreement for the banks. And that agreement has stood the test of time. It has led to the most amazing undertaking and remaking of prime real estate in a metropolitan area in the country, starting at the height of the recession, when nothing like that was going on anywhere else at all. We have collaborated, we have worked together, we have shared expenses. The agreement lays everything out with the division of costs and revenues. It was a fair deal then. It has been a fair deal throughout. It is a fair deal today. And this got to be careful of my choice of words here. This illogical focus on destroying all of that is coming forward out of City Hall with respect to not just the music venue, but other steps that are being taken to not honor that agreement that was struck and that has worked so well, to making demands from the county, but not collaborating on the side of the city, to taking every single possible step that could be taken to interfere with and interrupt with the progress that has been going on at the banks, is nothing short of unconscionable. And it is going to cost our city and our county and our region jobs. It is going to cost us prestige. It is going to cost us investment. It is going to cost us new development. It is going to cost us the completion of the banks as was envisioned originally, as was put into place with that unanimous agreement in 2007. And again, we broke ground just a few months after that in 2008. And it has been until recently, the past couple of years, when these objections after objection after objection were lodged without support, without reason, without logic, to interrupt moving forward with the next steps at the banks. It is going to cost us a lot with respect to that vision. I know we've all spoken out on this in various respects, but as long as I'm here, this project is so important to the future, to future generations of our community, in terms of what this means to all of us, not just in work, but into setting the stage for the next 50 to 100 years of work and development in Hamilton County. And again, it's not just about downtown development. The work that's being done, the jobs that are being created, the investments that are being made create so much work and economic activity in our region. These things help to fuel our investments in neighborhood and community development throughout all of Hamilton County. And yet, it seems every time we cross a hurdle, there is another one thrown up without any reason for it. I'm appealing to our friends at the city. I'm appealing to our friends on the City Planning Commission and the City Zoning Commission to exercise their independent thought and judgment and realize what they're doing here. If they are a part of this ongoing assault, attack on declaration of war against Hamilton County by leadership at the City of Cincinnati, with the banks as the battleground over which this fight is taking place. It's got to stop. Mayor Cranley, stop it. John, I appeal to you, stop it. Stop what you're doing. We've worked together on so many things. We've gotten a lot accomplished. We know what your position is. You fought the fight. But we have to move on. The compromises that our board struck with the city over the years, ever since we entered into that agreement in 2007 to make things go. We never drew the line in the sand on anything. If there's anything Mayor Mallory and I did in 2007, it was that we would not let things get in the way of moving forward with the progress at the banks, because the end result, the final product, what we would realize from that was far, far greater than whatever the little individual fight would be. And that was the hallmark of our working relationship. It's why we got the deal done. That's why we moved forward. And John, I'm appealing to you personally on 20 years of a personal relationship. Stop the fight. There's no reason for it. There's no logic to it. The agreement's in place. Let's abide by the development agreement of 2007 as amended, but in its principal terms. And let's move forward for the greater good, of all the people of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. And I say the same thing personally to every member of City Council, to those that I know and have worked with over so many years on the Zoning Commission, the Planning Commission. All we have to do is look in the rearview mirror to see what we've accomplished already by working together, to know what the future will bring. And it's time to look forward and not to draw or to take unreasonable positions at this point. Let's come together and move forward for the greater good. That's all I've got to say on that right now. But it's got to stop.
Thank you. And we will miss you when you are gone from our commission. That we will deal with that, and I know have comments at another time. Sure, but your sage advice and your historical perspective are really, really important to the work that we are doing, Todd. So thank you for those comments.
Thank you, Todd.
So I am going to move that we go into executive session. We've got two. Executive session pursuant to RC Section 121.22G2 for property acquisition. And well, let's do that one first. So I'll move that we go into that executive session.
Second.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
And an exec session pursuant to RC Section 121.22G2 for property acquisition.
Second.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.